This Saturday, World Press Freedom Day turns 21. It is time, thank you. It is time to take adult responsibility. Thank you to the Secretary General and President of the General Assembly, the Undersecretary General, the Chair of the General Assembly Committee on Information, UNESCO's Liaison Director, and the Director of the Outreach Division of the UN Department of Public Information, as well as to our distinguished panel. Reporters shine a light on injustice, informing international public opinion, and making and asking the rough and tough questions of the powerful. Freedom of speech for the press and for any individual is not optional. It's not a gift. It's an inherent human right, and that must be noted. But that human right must be recognized and, ironically, protected by governments. Freedom of expression and the right to report news is enshrined, as you've heard this morning from all of the speakers, in international humanitarian law, human rights agreements, and in national law around the world. Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says, everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression regardless of frontiers. The United Nations, therefore, in particular, has an important duty. The UN Security Council 8 years ago passed a resolution condemning violent acts against war correspondents. Last year, the General Assembly adopted a resolution for the first time directly addressing the safety of journalists, condemning unequivocally all attacks, including extrajudicial killings and arbitrary detention, intimidation, and harassment in both conflict and non-conflict situations. Today, we ask the United Nations to make 2014 a year to protect journalists by adding the freedom of information and press information to the post-2015 development agenda. Persecution of the press is, as you've heard, at epidemic proportions in 2014. Every day, we hear about some of our colleagues killed, jailed, tortured, and tried in sham courts. Since World Press Freedom Day began, over 1,000 journalists have been killed, and in 2013, 200 were jailed. Sadly, I cannot recite the names of all of those killed. I had hoped to, but the list is too long. Over a dozen journalists have been murdered this year alone. Attacks against the press, including broadcast, print, and online scribes, have reached just staggering numbers. The Committee to Protect Journalists and Reporters Without Borders lists the countries and the numbers. In Egypt, Peter Gresta, Mohammed Fahmy, and Baha Mohammed have been held in jail for 124 days, and Abdullah al-Shami for 260. Peter, Mohammed, and Bahar have appeared in court in white jumpsuits and caged. Why? For reporting the news. Some of their colleagues from Al Jazeera are here today who report from the United Nations. Why has the press, therefore, become such a target? Why is it in the crosshairs now more than ever? And we have seen it to be. The reach of information, the ability of information, the media's ability to foment political change threatens powerful rogues around the world. The internet has profoundly changed the way we view reporting and on news sources. New technology makes it easier to gather news, and it helps political movements to grow and challenge state-controlled media. Take, for example, Facebook. If that were a country, it would be the third largest here at the United Nations. That is, if member states were to accept its membership. There are over 200 million blogs, and there are applications on iPhones to translate over 60 languages. far more, 10 times more than our 6 official languages here at the UN. So what can anyone do to help journalists? Today, commemoration of World Press Freedom Day focuses on 3 interrelated themes. The media's importance in development, very important. The safety of journalists and the rule of law. The sustainability and integrity of journalism. The UN Correspondents Association is beginning a campaign to insert language on freedom of expression and protection of journalists worldwide into UN resolutions. And we call on the Open Working Group on Sustainable Development Goals to include freedom of expression and access to information and independent media as part of the post-2015 agenda. The Committee on Information and its chair here, you heard from the ambassador, are working toward that end. And we call on the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon to include these goals in your report, in his report later this year. Join us in this campaign with hashtag UNCA-Free-Press-Now and visit us at unca.com. Like many colleagues in the field, I have traveled where bullets have been fired around me, and it woke me up to the mission of a free press. It was truly a wake-up call. Many of my colleagues have not been so fortunate. Nelson Mandela said, "A critical, independent, and investigative press is the lifeblood of any democracy. The press must be free from state interference. It must have the economic strength to stand up to the blandishments of government officials. It must have sufficient independence from vested interests to be bold and inquiring without fear or favor. It must enjoy the protection of the Constitution so that it might protect our rights as everyone, as citizens." We ask the UN to make 2014 a year to protect journalists. Freedom of the press is indispensable, and it is time for the UN to become actively involved in supporting the inalienable right, the inherent right to speech and to protect my fellow journalists. The next generation of journalists and policymakers will be responsible for protecting inherent right of expression, and I have a shout out and thank you to the college students here today. Our message to our colleagues in the field is keep the faith. World Press Freedom Day has reached the age of majority, and the UN, we hope, is seized of the matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Falk. We've listened and we've heard very well your message, and I think your cause is our cause. Thank you very much for your remarks.